Howdy folks, and welcome to the World of Warships Update 0.4.1 Public Test Server. If you haven't gotten onto the test server, you've only got 1 day left to do it by the time you see this video at the very earliest. Head over to the World of Warships website and follow the instructions on the news page. You will have to create a specific new World of Warships public test account in order to get onto the test server, but that doesn't take long to do, and once you've downloaded the test client, you're up and running. What's new in 0.4.1? Quite a bit actually. Let's take a look. There's a new rank available in the player summary screen, rank 9. And rank 9 gives you access to ranked battles. This is kind of skill-based matchmaking. And they've actually managed to find a very elegant way of implementing it. Rather than going off specific player stats, like for example your kill to death ratio or your win rating or any number of other different things that you can use to calculate how good a player is at World of Warships, instead they've gone for a much more simple approach, and it looks like it might work quite well. So let me explain how it works in greater detail. Here is the current beta test season. It's only while the test server's up. It lasts 2 days. As you can see, there are 25 different ranks to attain. You start off at rank 25. You access the rank battles from the drop-down menu in exactly the same way that you do co-op and random battles. When you win a ranked battle, you earn a star. And if you earn enough stars, you advance a rank. If you lose or draw a ranked battle, you lose a star. So in order to advance up the ranks, you have to keep winning. The players that you get matched against are players who have earned a similar rank. The ranks are all split into various different brackets. So you're only ever going to be matched against players who have won the same number, more or less, of rank battles as you have. There's also a whole bunch of different rewards available for attaining various different ranks, as you can see here. You get all kinds of signal flags and different kinds of camouflage schemes and so on and so on and so on. So there's plenty of incentive to keep playing the ranked battles. Initially, I was kind of skeptical, but that's just because I didn't fully understand how it worked. I thought, well, yeah, great, so lose enough games and eventually everybody can be rank 1. But no, absolutely not. It will not work like that. If you keep losing your ranked battles, you'd never advance beyond rank 25. Well, I mean, I say that and I realise it is a statistical impossibility. Half the players in any given game are always going to win. But if you're that bad, you're going to lose the next one, and you'll lose the star that you won from being carried by the more competent players in the last game that you won. So it really does sort out the men from the boys, as it were. You will always be matched, at least until everybody's got 4 or 5 ranked battles under their belt and they've sorted out the winners from the losers. You're always going to be matched against people who've won the same amount of battles in ranked battles as you have. And it is in ranked battles only. This has nothing whatsoever to do with cooperative battles or random battles. This ranking is only determined by the number of games you've won when you select that ranked battle button. So, what are these ranked battles actually like? I really wish I could tell you. I can show you what the ranked battle queue screen looks like. I've been staring at this a lot. Eventually I sat in this queue for 10 minutes before I got sick of it and just went back to playing random battles. There just aren't enough people queuing up. I suspect there just aren't enough people who realise that ranked battles are available because the test server's only up for 2 days. And, well, there you go. What I can tell you about the ranked battles is that it's limited matchmaking. It's only available to ships of tiers 6 to 8. There are no more than 1 aircraft carrier or 2 battleships on each team, and teams consist of 7 players only. So anyway, ranked battles with level 9 player accounts, and I suspect we're going to get this tested more on the actual live open beta server than anything that's going to happen on the public test. But there it is. What else is new? Well, there are a couple of new maps, and I'll show you some games that I played on those maps shortly. There's also some changes made that are going to make aircraft carrier drivers in particular very, very happy. Anybody, I mean, I don't play aircraft carriers myself, but I do certainly sympathise if you're in a tier 6 aircraft carrier and there's a tier 8 aircraft carrier on the enemy team. One of his fighter groups is entirely capable of utterly demolishing every single torpedo and dive bomber squadron that you have, and that's, well, that's going to be a thing of the past. Aircraft carrier balance in random battles is now going to be strictly symmetrical. If you are in a tier 7 aircraft carrier, the enemy team will not have a tier 9 or 8 aircraft carrier. It will have another tier 7 aircraft carrier. So that's going to make aircraft carrier drivers in particular very, very happy indeed. There are also some changes to the way fighter groups operate. Instead of just clicking on an enemy air group and then forgetting about your fighters until they run out of ammunition or get shot down, you're going to have to manage them in the same way that you can manage your torpedo and dive bomber squadrons, by selecting an area for them to attack. There's also been some improvements made to two of the premium pre-order ships, the Sims and the Yubari. The Sims now has torpedoes with a longer range, but they're slower, and the Yubari gets access to the defensive fire anti-aircraft cooldown, which is normally only restricted to cruisers of tier 6 and higher that have a dual-purpose armament. As is fairly standard with any major patch, there's also been a whole bunch of tweaks and rebalancing done to many of the various different Japanese and American ships in general, but in specific, there's been quite a significant change done for battleships, and this is a huge buff. The accuracy of battleships' main battery guns has been significantly buffed at short ranges of up to 3 kilometers. Now, I don't think this addresses all of the concerns that battleship players have with the way that their ships work in World of Warships, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. I have all kinds of issues with battleships as they currently stand in World of Warships, and this is the reason why I just don't have any in the current open beta test. I'm strictly a cruiser and destroyer kind of guy. I certainly enjoyed playing battleships in the closed beta test. I loved the Congo, I loved the Fuso, I loved the Nagato, I quite liked the New York, didn't like the Colorado, and the South Carolina is possibly the worst ship ever made. And it's no better on the test server, right? It still sucks donkey's balls. It is just, oh no. In fact, the South Carolina is so bad that I'm going to play battleships again on the open beta server. Based on what I've seen from the public test, I will be playing battleships again, but I am definitely going to free XP my way through the South Carolina. It's the St. Louis is a better tier 3 battleship than the South Carolina, and it's not a battleship. Seriously, it is. It's got more health, its guns fire further, it's got more of them. I think it's also faster and more manoeuvrable. It's just ridiculous. Of course, the St. Louis is overpowered. You see, here's the thing about the St. Louis. I mean, I love the St. Louis, but it is ridiculously overpowered. And if you're in a tier 3, 4 or 5 battleship, the South Carolina, the Wyoming, the New York, the Congo, the Kawachi, the Miyogi, any of those battleships, and you see a St. Louis on the enemy team, here's the thing. What ammunition do you fire at him? High explosive or armor piercing? Because the thing about the St. Louis is it's a protected cruiser. It has, I think, just over 100 millimeters of armor in certain sections of the ship. Now that 100 millimeters of armor is just enough. Right? It's just enough to make your high explosive ammunition not terribly effective against him. But it's not enough to prevent your armor piercing from over-penetrating and going clean out the other side and doing minimal damage. So what ammunition do you fire at a St. Louis when you're in a battleship? Right? That's the question. And it's the major reason why St. Louis has given me so many bloody headaches when I'm in a ship like the South Carolina, the Wyoming, or even the New York at tier 5. Now, that obviously isn't a St. Louis, it's a New Mexico, so this is a nice, fairly even fight. He's been pointing his ship straight towards me, so I've actually been able to point more of my gun turrets towards him, but now we're going broadside onto each other, and up until now he's been at more than 3 kilometers away. But by the time I reload these guns, it's going to be a less than 3 kilometer range, and previously you've seen shots from the same turret at ranges of in excess of 3 kilometers, spreading out hundreds of meters apart. That just does not happen at ranges of less than 3 kilometers. Look at that, 10 hits. And set him on fire with armor piercing. Having said that, I'd probably set him on fire with my secondary batteries, but you might be sitting there thinking, well, of course you hit him, Jingles, you know, there's only a couple of 100 meters between you. Well, yeah, but that's kind of the point. Previously, on the live server now, half of those shots would have missed, and that's what's so infuriating about driving battleships in World of Warships. At ranges like this, the guns are just ridiculously, unrealistically inaccurate. Well, not anymore. And that's fantastic news, because when you're at this kind of range, with, for example, a St. Louis, even if you are in a tier 6 battleship, as I am now here in my New Mexico, and you unload a broadside from 12 of your 14-inch guns, and half of them miss, and the ones that hit over-penetrate and do minimal damage, or just blow off some of his gun turrets, it's incredibly frustrating. Meanwhile, he's lighting you up with his massed batteries of high explosive shells fired from his 156mm guns, and he is not missing. and you just burn to death. And that's why this is a fantastic change for Battleship drivers. Now, before Battleship drivers get a little too carried away, you're still going to get set on fire with monotonous regularity when you're driving a Battleship in World of Warships. Nothing has changed as far as that is concerned. Even if you take the Commander Crew skill that reduces the chance that your ship is going to burn by 7% in combination with the equipment module that reduces the chance that your ship is going to burn by 5%, you're still going to get set on fire. That has not changed. Then of course you've got the other problem that Battleship drivers face on a regular basis, and that hasn't gone away either, having the wrong ammunition type loaded for the target that you really need to kill right now, like that Tenryu class cruiser, who luckily has fired his torpedoes in the other direction. I've been shooting at that Battleship back there, so I've got armour piercing loaded, but armour piercing is just going to over-penetrate a ship like the Tenryu. I'll fire my armour piercing at that Auber, however, but the Tenryu is on the other side now. Well, this is what your secondary batteries are for in battleships, and I highly recommend installing all of the equipment modules that increase the range and effectiveness of your secondary batteries, as well as the crew skills that increase the effectiveness of your secondary batteries, because in a situation like this, well, you just can't shoot at them all. I'm right in the middle of 5 different enemy ships here. My secondary batteries, because I focused them on the Tenryu, they've set him on fire, and they've almost sunk him, but he's now a good old distance away, so I've switched the focus of my secondary batteries, and you do this by holding down control and left clicking on whichever target you want to focus your gun batteries on, and I've now focused them on the Auber. Again, very luckily, the Auber had already launched his torpedoes before he closed in, and now I'm in trouble, because that's a St. Louis. And he's gonna have me. I've sunk the Tenryu now, by the way, again from the firepower and the fires started by the high explosive shells fired from my secondary guns. I have armour piercing. This is exactly the sort of thing I'm talking about with the St. Louis. I've got armour piercing loaded because I was firing armour piercing at the Auber and at the Miyogi at the back there. And I've hit this guy with armour piercing, but it's just over penetrating. So, alright. My secondary gun batteries are actually doing more damage to this guy than my 14-inch guns. Although the armour piercing did do significant damage to him when he was facing directly towards me. It over-penetrated, sure, but it over-penetrated and then travelled the entire length of the ship, and so that did do some significant damage, but around about half of the damage that I'm doing to this guy is from the secondary gun batteries alone. Of course, now you run into the issue when you get somebody this close to you that you just cannot turn the gun turrets fast enough to shoot him. So the fact that he's less than 3 kilometers away isn't really helping. I can't point the guns at him, but I slow the ship down and I turn, and I manage to, in combination with the turret traverse and actually turning the ship, finally manage to sink this little bugger. I really hate fighting those things. They are an absolute nightmare. There's all kinds of things that Battleship drivers have gotten used to in World of Warships, just in order for their ships to be playable. Things like having to fit the equipment modules that reduce the risk of fire, as well as the crew skills that reduce the risk of fire, and having your ship burn anyway. You know, we're used to it. Now, you could make the case that captains of all the different classes of ships in the game have certain types of crew skills and equipment modules that they have to fit in order to be effective. Destroyers, for example, they're going to want to take, certainly a Japanese destroyer is going to want to take the equipment modules that reduce the reload on their torpedoes. Cruisers are going to have to take the equipment modules and crew skills that increase the effectiveness of their anti-aircraft batteries. Aircraft carriers are going to have to take the crew skills and the equipment modules that increase the effectiveness and flexibility of their aircraft groups. So why are battleships complaining? Well, battleships have to do all that and more, just in order to not suck. Battleships already get spotted long before any other class of ship in the game, and because everybody likes to fire nothing but high explosive at battleships, you spend more time burning than any other class of ship in the game, and when you're burning, you can be seen from even further away, making you an even bigger target. So battleships have to fit all the crew skills and all of the equipment modules that reduce the chance of fire. Now, if you're in a cruiser or a destroyer and you're being engaged by more than one target, well, if you're in a destroyer, you just maneuver, drop smoke and get out of there. If you're in a cruiser, you maneuver, you return fire with all of your rapid firing medium caliber guns. If you're in a battleship, well, you're manoeuvring so hard to avoid the torpedoes that are being fired at you while you're burning that you just can't keep your gun turrets pointed at them. So you have to invest in the crew skills and equipment modules that increase the effectiveness and range of your secondary batteries in order to take care of the targets that you just cannot physically point the gun turrets at. Now, if by some miracle you have any spare change after fitting all the stuff that's hopefully going to prevent you from burning too much and all the stuff that's going to increase the range and effectiveness of your secondary gun batteries, you better reach deep into your pockets because you're going to have to upgrade your anti-aircraft guns as well. Oh, surely not, Jingles. Surely the dual-purpose cruisers on your team will stay close to the battleships and protect them from air attack. You're new here, aren't you? No. Well, sometimes it does happen, and trust me, you guys in the Clevelands and the Baltimores who do stick close to your battleships, battleship drivers love you, but you can't rely on it happening. And so, yep, battleship drivers have to reach deep into their pockets and upgrade the firepower of their anti-aircraft guns, as well as taking the crew skills that affect the effectiveness of their anti-aircraft guns, because you can't rely on the cruisers to do it for you. And no aircraft carrier captain in his right mind is going to send a torpedo bomber against a Baltimore when he could attack a Colorado or a New Mexico instead. They're just easier targets to hit, and while they can have some pretty mean anti-aircraft guns, they don't have that defensive fire cooldown that dual-purpose cruisers do. And just in case you thought we were finished, if by any chance you've got any money left over, or even a spare equipment slot at this stage, you're going to want to do something about improving the effectiveness, the accuracy, perhaps the traverse speed, or the reload of those monstrously big guns that are the only reason you bothered driving a battleship in the first place. Battleship drivers put up with a lot in World of Warships. I've just listed it all for you, and the reason battleship drivers put up with it is because of the big guns on their ships. If not for those big guns, they'd all be sailing cruisers and probably having a lot more fun. But it's getting those citadel penetrations. It's scoring those massive hits that blast the enemy target right into the middle of next week. That's what makes it all worthwhile. And unfortunately, well, this may just be a statistical anomaly, but one thing that really stood out on the public test server was that after firing hundreds of shots in Tier 3, 4, 5 and 6 battleships for an entire day of playing on the test server, I only scored 2 citadel penetrations. Now, before everybody gets too carried away, it is entirely possible that what I've experienced is just a statistical anomaly, and I'm making a mountain out of nothing here. But hundreds of shots fired from 12, 14 and 15 inch guns, 2 citadel penetrations. Now that does suggest a trend. And of course there are no patch notes available for patch 0.4.1 yet. There's just a summary of the changes on the World of Warships website on the news page. So this is idle speculation. It may be wrong. It may just be, as I said, a statistical anomaly. I got incredibly unlucky and I just couldn't land a penetrating hit on the right part of the dozens of different ships that I poured hundreds of shells into. You know, unlikely though that sounds, it's possible. Now, again, before you battleship drivers start crying into your cornflakes and waving goodbye to the citadel penetrations that are the only reason you play your battleships in the first place, I'm not saying that I didn't do a lot of damage on the test server. I did. I did a lot of damage on the test server. But I just didn't get, well, more than 2 citadel penetrations the entire day. My armor-piercing shells were going in. They were doing damage. When I was being forced to switch to high explosive, they were doing damage as well. But it was consistent damage. It's more of a smooth damage curve, if you like, than the kind of spiky damage curve that you battleship drivers are used to. And you know the sort of thing I'm talking about. You unleash all 8 of your Congo's 14-inch guns at a target 15 kilometers away. Of the 8 shots that you fire, 3 hit. 1 of those bounces, and the other 2 do a combined total of 2,800 damage. Your target's a little closer now. You fire again. All 8 of your guns miss. 30 seconds later, you unleash another broadside. All 8 of your shots hit, 6 of them are citadel penetrations, and you blow him out of the water. It's amusing, but it's not consistent. And it may be, and again I cannot stress this enough, this is empirical evidence based on 1 day of playing on the test server. But when you're firing hundreds and hundreds of shots from various different caliber battleship guns at targets all day, and in that period you only scored 2 citadel penetrations, and yet you are still doing a lot of damage. It's consistent damage. There are no patch notes available to back this up, but it's a feeling that I have that we're going to be seeing less damage spikes from battleships and a more smooth, predictable, consistent, reliable damage curve. I'm very curious to hear the experiences of other battleship drivers on the test server. Again, it may be the case that I've just been exceptionally unlucky or a terrible shot, and I just haven't been hitting and penetrating the right parts of the enemy ships. On the other hand, if you guys are having the same experience, well, that definitely indicates that something's going on. And I really can't wait to see the full patch notes for 0.4.1, which of course haven't been released yet. And, well, let's say I'm wrong. Let's say I am just imagining things, and in fact from just looking at the various different video clips that I've added here, I can see that I have actually scored more than 2, but it hasn't been more than 5. But even if this was the case, what would you battleship drivers think? Would you prefer a sort of more smooth damage curve, the sort of thing that I've been talking about in this video today, rather than the kind of RNG dependent nature of battleship gunnery that we're currently used to in World of Warships as it stands on the live server? So that's pretty much it for today's video on the World of Warships test server, but before we go there is one final thing that I wanted to share with you, and it's got absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with anything that may or may not appear in the patch notes. No, this is just something that I saw in the team lists that really amused me during a battle on the new Solomon Islands map. Do any of those names strike you as being familiar? Obviously my name isn't. You have to create a new account to play on the test server, and so I got to choose a name that wasn't going to attract any attention. For those of you who are curious, the name Alluriel is just the name of my Night Elf priest in World of Warcraft, and it was as good a name as any to go without arousing any kind of undue attention while I'm playing on the test server. But there is a Jingles on one of these teams. Oh yes, and that's not all. There's a Jingles lover too. And they really hit it off in chat. I would love to see their faces when they see this video on YouTube and realise that I actually caught them fangirling over each other in chat. It was quite a surreal situation. You've got Jingles and Jingles lover talking to each other in chat while the real Jingles are sitting there watching thinking, should I get involved? Nah. They were having such a nice time, I thought I'd just leave them to it. But of course, a forbidden love like this can only end one way, and Jingles did in fact kill Jingles lover. And on that bombshell, that's it for this episode of World of Warships. I hope you've enjoyed it, folks, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.